you so much for meeting with me so that we can have a little bit of dialogue around child-safe environments in family daycare. I am so grateful that I get to meet with you because you are a senior officer in the family daycare space in New South Wales. And I think this is such a relevant time to be talking about what's happening in your service type in our sector. So thank you. And I will get straight to the questions. So I guess if we're talking about child-safe environments, we know that that requires a commitment in everything and all the decision-making that we do. So I was wondering if you could tell us, please, how do you actually make child safety information visible at the homes of family daycare? So what does that actually look like? How does it become visible?
That's a really great question, Nicole. Thanks for having me today. I guess during visits to educators' homes, authorised officers, there's quite a few things that we look around the child safety information, specifically around those educators' displays. We like to see that parents and educators have access to those policies and procedures that are created from their service provider. We're seeing a lot of really creative ways they're displayed, not only in folders, but with QR codes now.
Wow.
There's lots of great information on display around child protection training, which I guess gives a very clear indication of how child safety information is visible to our parents that come into those spaces. Educators are able to describe and really have in-depth conversations with officers around safe sleep practices for each individual child, and they really take into consideration requirements around that sleep and rest for children. As such, educators are also very knowledgeable around individual health plans for children. And then the other child safe information that we know providers provide to their educators, posters on hand washing. We've got lots of hygienic information, daily safety checks. We're seeing plans around supervision so that those environments and information is safe, and lots around emergency drills and emergency plans.
Great, that is so much information, and I'm really quite I'm excited to hear that there is a multi approach to how this information is made available to families. A QR code was not something that I was expecting you to see. I'm actually really I'm really impressed that there are so many different ways to create understanding, I guess, isn't it, around having a risk-aware environment, and all of these different means enable, I guess, all different families to be able to access information in the way that is user-friendly for them.
That's right.
In relation to things like commitment to child safety and really thinking about mitigating harm to children whilst they're in the family daycare environment, I would imagine that families would also have access to the child safe standards, because they're actually, compliance enforcement came in on the 1st of February in 2023 in New South Wales. Was this something that families have really, I guess, found it really easy to get that information if you've got so many different means for disseminating it to families?
I guess what we're seeing, the short answer is yes, and we're seeing that educators have been kept up to date with that child safety information.
Right.
For families, it all comes back to those service providers incorporating that child safety in their mission and their philosophy. We know that they're ensuring a child safe culture, which is reflected in their organisation mission statements and their values.
Right.
We are seeing for parents access to those service philosophies, which we know is an overarching document which guides those pedagogical practices for educators and staff. And this is really visible to parents and the community. We're seeing a greater commitment to child safety throughout all our service providers. And it comes back to those developments of policies and procedures. So it's a really positive, knowledgeable step that we're seeing in this space.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. That's a beautiful segue into my next question, because that is what I was curious about. How are service providers keeping up to date with child safety information?
And I guess when we're having those dialogues and conversations with educators in their homes, we're really seeing that promotion of a child safe culture, and the educators are keeping themselves up to date on requirements. It's no longer just the responsibility of our service providers. We know that educators, it is their responsibility as well. They're encouraged to comply with the code of conduct and set a standard of behaviour for those educators. We're seeing educators keeping themselves up with mandatory reporting requirements. The understanding of those requirements ensures that they act appropriately when concerns arise. And we're seeing that educators essentially are keeping children safe in their homes, and that child safety is everyone's responsibility. It's a very active participation, which is necessary. There's lots of training on the OCG, including learning modules founded by New South Wales Department of Education, with their tailored pathways for FDC services, and the mini podcast series, which has been really great, the OCG and other safe training. We also know that there's lots of free resources available in the ECE resource library on the department's website, and there's great, obviously, information that's been provided from a CEQA for these educators to keep up to date with that child safety information.
I guess that having such a wealth of information on the Office of the Children's Guardian, and, you know, like you said, all of those extra resources like the podcast series, I guess that makes it a lot easier to be able to, in dialogue, even share this information with families who no doubt access a lot of this information themselves. It's readily available online, right?
That's correct. And we're actually seeing educators engaging with those parents, having small parent meetings, having conversations, handing out information, and links are being provided. So it's a really proactive response. The educators are really appreciating the information that they have, and they want to encourage those child safe standards and those good practices around child safety for their own environments and homes to their educators and their children and families.
Brilliant. Brilliant. It's such a collaborative space, isn't it, to be doing this work well? It requires all stakeholders to be actively committed.
That's right.
And you need the information to maintain your knowledge and insight in what is happening, but also what else is available to help with that understanding. So I guess in terms of children in the environment, in the family daycare environments, how do they know? What are some of the things that help children to know that they have rights when they're in their services?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? I guess as authorised officers, we see and engage educators can support children to develop skills by guiding some of their children's behaviours as mentors, and helping children to negotiate their rights in relation to other children and the rights of themselves. We all are aware that an important aspect of children's belonging, being and becoming will involve in how they learn and how their behaviour and acts affects themselves and others. And we're really seeing some good practices of these educators helping to develop those skills, those regulations and those skills of independence to support children's rights within their service.
Yeah, and I think that's the fantastic aspect about the intimate nature of a family daycare environment, isn't it? That you can really have such consistency and continuity when you are really, you know, that relational practice that happens in that environment. It's a familiar person that can really, I guess, continuously build that capacity for children to understand that they do have rights, and they see in everyday moments that decision-making is about foregrounding the rights of everybody, but it gives them a really nice opportunity to be able to show the impact on each other in such a smaller environment, such as an family daycare environment. And, you know, I think so many opportunities arise in family daycare environments for children to be able to, as you said, see the role modeling, what respectful practice looks like, and decision making that foregrounds children's rights.
That's right. And we see a lot of relationships within these family daycare educators. They've got families that know each other intimately. There's some of siblings, there's cousins, there's relationships. So it's a really lovely environment to be able to support, for these educators to support children in these practices, but also they can take these life learnt skills out of this space and use them in everyday practice, which is all about children having rights and being supported in their own little spaces as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was also just thinking then when you were talking, having, like you said, that connection between who is present in the space is often a broader age group than what you might actually say, different ages and stages of development. So I guess that decision making and listening to what children are trying to tell us could be absolutely through verbal dialogue, but of course there would be other occasions where there would be non-verbal communication. And so I think being able to actually experience that in your family daycare environments is such a rich learning opportunity for all of those children in the space.
Very unique, that's right.
Yeah. So thinking about the space, and I love it that you actually talked about the fact that these are absolutely lifelong skills that you can take into other environments in the community beyond the family daycare environment. What's actually happening to support children to learn about being safe when using technology?
Yeah, it's a very new approach, isn't it, for all of us to get on board? I'm not from the technology era, but I've very fast got on board.
We have no choice, do we? I know.
Yeah, we know that the use of digital technology is happening and it is occurring. Digital technology such as tablets or smartphones have become a real integral part of the daily lives of educators and children, and we are seeing this evolve in the space of family daycare. Using those digital touch technologies in programming is often essential for some of our educators, and our services have definitely thought about the best way to use these technologies, such as how they can support children with those educational programs. We've seen educators more familiar with traditional pedagogical practices in books and learning, but it's important to remember that introducing technology does not mean it's replacing our current pedagogical practices. It's rather using them as a tool to support the current work with children. So I guess some of those examples that we're seeing in the family daycare space is that when educators may be promoting children's understanding of sustainable practices, they might sing relevant songs, they might read a story, and they will link that to some sort of sustainability app, or, the child might identify a program that they're being able to practice or utilise within the community. We also have seen educators might further engage children's learning with technology by using images or digital stories, particularly in our multicultural family daycare spaces, where we know that English is not a first language for some of our educators and children. So there are many possibilities that can be explored with this digital touch technology and apps for children. We also understand that it is the choice of educators and their service providers, and this is probably where we are going. We very much encourage that the PD in Your Pocket session is available on the New South Wales FDC Association website to provide some more support and resources to educators, and we know that's been readily used.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing you say there is that educators are really adopting a really considered approach, aren't they, to what they're using, making sure they're using reputable sources, doing those safety checks, and part of that, I think, if we go back to that dialogue that you mentioned earlier of role modeling safe practices, it's about making sure that you don't just jump online and access anything, that you're really careful when you're doing that you're mindful of the time that you're spending online. I think I love one aspect of the eSafety Commissioner training and resources that's available to everybody, whether it be educators, families. I love the fact that they incorporate into that taking time away from tech. I think that's so important in this tech savvy world, that we're also teaching how to be safe in terms of our safety, but also our well-being and what that looks like. And we don't want to saturate our every moment of every day with tech, but when we are choosing to use it wisely, that we are sharing with children how we do that carefully, and we're thinking about what it is that we're accessing, and if we're not sure, that we ask, and we feel as though we know how to create that safe usage. So
that's right. And we're also seeing a greater understanding of policies and procedures and practices within this space. It's a new identified policy that services are bringing out. So it's really important that educators are familiar with what their services obligations are as well. And the feedback from parents is very noticeable on those policies and procedures, which educators are following, that we're seeing in this space.
Right. And I think that is such a good stepping stone, isn't it? Because we've now got a CEQA's release of the National Model Code. And I think what I've seen in the sector in all different service types, and I'm curious to hear whether or not it's the same for the family daycare environments, is that we're starting to really think about when we're using technology and what we are, I guess, what type of technology we're using, what images we're taking, how we're storing those. So really thinking about the why, I guess.
That's right. And we do know that the approved providers and their services, they're encouraged to adopt the voluntary national model code. We know that it's there to promote that child-safe culture when it comes to talking about sharing and that storing of images and videos. And there is definitely discussions that are happening at service levels and educator levels as to where they feel comfortable to, provide this national model code into their everyday practice.
Fantastic. I think everybody will be ready for the legislation when it comes to light. So the thinking and the what if now is an absolutely well-needed approach if we're going to implement further change into our policies and our practices. So I guess I'm curious about how children could raise concerns in the family daycare environment. I know in my work in the sector, we're really starting to think about how easy that actually is for children, and dependent on how large or small the environment is that they are in, I think we've really started, that child safe standards have really started to get us thinking about what options are there to truly raise a concern. And it might be, I often get asked that question, well, what would children have concerns about? And it might be they're not happy with decision making that their educator has suggested that they do. That could be something as simple as equipment, or when they're eating their lunch, or so I'm wondering about, because of the nature of the family daycare environment, would I be right in saying that that relationship is so well formed in terms of trust that the family daycare would be able to perhaps pick up on cues from children if they don't have the language to say, I'm not happy with that?
Yeah, I think you're right, Nicole. It's a really important topic to cover. We see in discussions and through theory-based evidence of some of our educators in programming, at the end of the month, we see that children can quite often write down their experiences that they've participated in that month, what their likes or dislikes have been. So again, without that verbal communication, there still is a way for them to have a voice. And being able to maybe comment around some things that they've enjoyed in the space or not so. We've seen reference to children's comments around, what's worked for them this month, what the space looks like for them. And so it's a really important way of unpacking how they are being able to use their voice in other ways of creating those safe spaces for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, I'm loving that we're really empowering children to be able to know, I guess that's that whole child rights argument, isn't it? That they have a right to be able to raise concerns. And I love the fact, and I would think so much so in a family daycare environment, that you don't have to raise concerns on your own. And I guess when you're saying that there are so many siblings and close connections with the children in the family daycare environments, it would become almost, such a regular practice to be able to raise concerns on behalf of your fellow, peer or sibling or cousin. Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. I love that. I am really so grateful for that, in all the insight that you've been able to give us of what's actually happening in family daycare environments. I think I can't help but think that from the child safety review, there were so many recommendations, but what I keep hearing from all your answers to my questions is that it aligns, what you're saying aligns so much with one of the recommendations was to amend for quality area 7 in the national quality standards to really look at enshrining this child safe culture in governance and leadership. And that's what I'm hearing you say throughout all of your responses, is there is a really rich culture that has been continuously built upon through what's happening in the space and what else can happen.
That's right. And I guess we're really seeing that there is creating a culturally safe environment really means to our educators and service providers that everyone, especially those from all different types of groups, feel safe and secure and respected. And we're really seeing that cultural safe environment is one that's recognised, it's being respected. It's about cultural identity for these people and these educators. And it's characterised by like a two-way communication. It's a trust between people and it's a trust between the knowledge that we're getting from the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that real rich consultative approach, isn't it? So that you can utilise the feedback. People are well informed, they have great relationships. And so there is this, like you said, this two-way sharing of information that is no doubt informing practices and policy in this space. So I can't thank you enough for meeting with me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, for your time. It's been a pleasure to be here. I'm very passionate about the sector and about child safe standards, so I'm only looking forward to this space.
Great. Thanks.
That's okay.